When fears come in and flood your mind, when you think you're going down, when you think you're not going to make it, when you think you're going to fail God, or you've not measured up, when the enemy comes in and tells you that you're unworthy, you're unholy, you're no good, you'll never get it. What do you do when the enemy comes in like a flood? You see, the Lord raises up a standard. Let me show you what that standard is. Look at verse 1. The Lord reigneth. He is clothed with majesty. The Lord is clothed with strength, wherewith he hath girded himself. And he's put on his armor and set for battle. You have to have a clear vision that your Lord and Savior is standing by. His eyes on your flood, his eyes on you. You have to have a clear vision of what God has promised here. I've not ignored you. I see where you're at. I see what you're going through. Look at me, he says. I have girded myself. I put on my armor. I have my sword in hand. And then read what it says, verse 4. The Lord on high is mightier than the noise of many waters, yea, than the mighty waves of the sea. God says, get your eyes off the flood, get it on me. I've got my sword in hand. I am more powerful. I am mightier than all your floods. I'm bigger than all your fears. Get your eyes off your fears. He said, I've girded myself. That hit me. I could hardly sleep. I picture my Lord standing over me, sword in hand. He knows how far it can go and no further. He'll come and slay the dragon in his time. He's saying, now you just stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. You just put your trust in me right now. Don't be afraid.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Just going to be a little watch along here. Maybe get some more people in here later. I just kind of started the stream just for a little bit of fun. And we're going to watch I think a personally sad display of the ambassadors of evolution here. And we're going to watch their just arguments utterly fall apart and get destroyed, like always. Nothing really new here with this. But, yeah, I don't know. Evolution, things are supposed to be getting better and better. Yet, every evolutionist Kent starts debating seems to get dumber and dumber. So, it's unfortunate. These people are brainwashed to this religion of death. So let's just go ahead and play this, and I'll probably get some people in here a little bit later to discuss. I'll be AFK for a little. I'll just be playing this for your entertainments. Enjoy.
All right, welcome to Standing for Truth. My name is Donnie, and I am your host and moderator for tonight's great evolution debate. Specifically, we are debating the question, is there good scientific evidence for evolution? And this is the first of many debates for 2024, and I am excited for this. We've got a new debater. We've got a new face for the debate octagon here. Another skeptical guy. And so before we get into opening statements and the debate itself, why don't we get acquainted a little bit, kind of break the ice, get to know both guests. And so another skeptical guy, let's start with you. Firstly, thank you for doing this. Appreciate your time. A little bit about yourself.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for letting me debate. Yes, I'm another skeptical guy. You can call me skeptic guy. I'll figure out who you're talking to. Yeah, so I have a bachelor's of science, a BS in physics with a minor in math. I am very passionate about scientific literacy and people understanding science correctly. I'm for self-investigation of scientific postulates. But yeah, this is my first debate. Terrible intro. I apologize for that. But yeah, I have a job, 9 to 5. That's pretty much me, just an average guy.
Oh, it gets worse from here, buddy.
Average skeptical guy. So no, I appreciate it. That was a good introduction. Hopefully this is your first of many, as we do certainly enjoy debates around here on Standing for Truth. So appreciate the intro. Dr. Dino, great to have you back. Brother, you're certainly no stranger to Standing for Truth, nor debates in general. And so it looks like this is debate number 340. So Kent, how have you been? A little bit about yourself. And then just, oh, you're good.
Yep, doing great. My name's Kent Hovind. I've been a Baptist preacher almost 50 years. I taught high school science and math, including physical science, for 15 years. I believe the Bible is true, and evolution is one of the dumbest and most dangerous religions in the history of the world. Shouldn't be taught in public schools at taxpayer expense, that's for sure. It's nothing but a religion. People believe in it. And I'm so thrilled to hear that our skeptic guy is passionate about science. And I think he said something about he wants to understand and examine the claims of science. This will be his last debate then, because he'll be on our side by the end of this debate. We'll straighten him out.
Kid's already smelling the blood in the water.
We're working towards a conversion tonight, gentlemen. That'll be great. Live conversion. So Kent, another skeptical guy, appreciate the introductions from the both of you. So what we have tonight is more of an informal debate. For the audience, what we're going to start off with is a bit of an opening statement. Another skeptical guy is going to put forth a couple arguments for us to engage. Once we've exhausted the topic, as we usually do around the hour mark, we will take some live questions and engagement, as this is a 2-in-1 event. So why don't we get right into the fun here? Another skeptical guy, we're going to hand it over to you. And just take a few minutes and start us off, and then we'll go back and forth on that. The floor is yours.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Kent. Thank you, Donnie. So I would like to start off with the definition of science. According to sciencecouncil.org, the definition of science is the pursuit and application of knowledge and understanding of the natural and social world following a systematic methodology based on evidence. Or if you prefer another definition, is any system of knowledge that is concerned with the physical world and its phenomena, and that entails unbiased observations and systematic experimentation. Thus, taking into account those two definitions, evolution is undoubtedly a science, despite Kent's unfounded claims to the contrary. Fundamentally, this realization that all life is related comes from the similarities that are found within all forms of life. For example, our cells are eukaryotic, which is something that we share with protists, plants, fungi, and animals. Beyond that, we are in the kingdom Animalia, and beyond that, we are chordates. This means that we have a notochord, a dorsal nerve cord, postanal tail, endostyle, and pharyngeal slits. Of course, the phylogeny will continue beyond that, but that does not take away from the original statement that we are still eukaryotes. So to answer the question, that undoubtedly is floating around in Kent's
Having a little bit of connection issues. Let me do this really quick. It usually helps. Stop screen, presents, share screen. You do that.
his claim that the Earth is 6,000 years old. There was a global flood, and the plants and animals on the Earth were made in 6 literal days. So, to talk about the evidences I would like to be discussing for this debate. So, the best evidences, of which there are many more than I will state, are the evidence found in the geologic column, the fact that evolution is confirmed by multiple different sciences, eyewitnesses to evolution, and the pollinating and grafting compatibility in plants. So that is my intro and my set evidences. So I will turn it back over to Kent.
Okay, very good. I appreciate that. That was just over 2 minutes. So before we get into a back and forth discussion, why don't we hand it to Kent? And Kent, take roughly 2 minutes to either respond or make some initial arguments. So Kent, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. I guess to be like Bill Clinton and examine this title tonight, what's the definition of is? Is there good scientific evidence for evolution? I think I'm glad that he has a good definition of science. Science is things is knowledge gained by observation, by testing, by experiments. This has been the standard definition of science for years. It comes from the Latin word "ser," to know. What do we know? We know cows produce cows. We know dogs produce dogs. We do not know that you are related to a pine tree. That's something you have to believe. You say because we're all chordate, we have different animals have backbones, and therefore that proves a common ancestry. Come on now, that's not science. Could prove all kinds of things. It could prove it's a good design that works. Could prove a common designer made them all. Certainly not proof that we're related. So we'll get into each of these evidences. I wrote as fast as I could, but I agree. Science deals with things we can observe, study, test, and demonstrate. From the Latin word knowledge. What do we know? Well, we know cows produce cows. We see that. They say religions are not part of science. I agree. And evolution is a religion. You have to believe in it. Nobody's ever seen a cow produce a non-cow or a dog produce a non-dog. You have to believe it. Science is knowledge gained through study and practice. Go ask any farmer that's been raising cows for generations in their family, or dogs, or potatoes, or anything. They'll tell you there are variations within that kind, but they always seem to stay within the same kind. And as far as classification system, come on, skeptic guy, are you skeptical of that? It's man putting his classification onto the creatures. They don't care how we classify them. They know what to look for. Turn all the animals loose in the woods. They'll find their own mate. And the foxes look for other foxes, and the cows look for cows, and the dogs look for dogs. They don't look for a pine tree to mate with. They know what kind they are. God said they'd bring forth after their kind. That's all that's ever been observed. And I admit that that creation is a religion. I have to believe that God created the world. I've never seen that. But you guys won't admit that evolution is a religion. You're going to fight that tonight. I can see that already. So go ahead. Tell us why you think evolution is part of science instead of religion.
Kent, thank you very much for that 2-minute intro. Another skeptical guy. Let's throw it back to you. Feel free to take another 2 minutes roughly to respond. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the first thing I want to address is that evolution isn't a faith-based belief system, while religion generally is. So the reason is there's no evidence besides a book for the reason for belief in the Bible. And faith is a fine thing, but evolution doesn't operate on faith. It does operate on evidence and what we have observed. So the dogs not producing non-dogs, or the cats producing non-cats. That's silly, because we know that is not an accurate description of evolution. Evolution does not say that will happen because of the law of monophily. But I agree with Kent's definition of science, however elementary it might be. So we do observe evolution. So the peppered moth in the Industrial Revolution was largely white, and it could use that to blend into stone and upon trees. When the Industrial Revolution happened in England, it covered most of those surfaces with soot, and so the peppered moth, the white variant, stood out quite significantly and was eaten. in that time, the black variant of that same moth, which was a less dominant trait within the population of the moth, survived. And in fact, the levels skyrocketed of that color of moth. So that's an example of survival of the fittest, natural selection, call it what you will, which is a mechanism of evolution. And in fact, you really can't have evolution without survival of the fittest. So we see that, and so I would like, Kent, if you could, to explain how the peppered moth isn't an example of evolution, and how that could happen, how that is not evidence for evolution, or the nature of evidence for evolution.
Okay, thank you. Good timing. Kent, we'll throw it back to you. Take roughly 2 to 3 minutes to respond. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you. That's a fair question. What about the peppered moth? This was often given in the early days as one of the best evidences for evolution. Here's what happened. The peppered moth has always produced a variety of colors in its babies. Some are dark, some are light. Well, and when the trees were light colored, the birds could see the dark ones easier and they would eat them. The light ones had more camouflage. And so somebody counted the moths in England and said there's 95% light moths and 5% dark. Then the Industrial Revolution, they started burning coal in the factories, the trees turned black. And they went around and counted the moths again and found out that now there's only 5% light and 95% dark. Okay. They're still a moth. They didn't change anything. They already had those colors. This is natural selection. You see, Charles, our skeptic guy, it's natural selection selects. It doesn't create anything. Nothing new was created here. It started off a moth. It ended up a moth. Nothing changed. That's not evidence that the moth came from an amoeba and were related to pine trees. So this is one of the lies I cover in my textbook. It's in all the textbooks in my seminar. It's in all the textbooks, though, as evidence for evolution. Tulsa Zoo still has a big display showing how this is evidence for evolution. Here's a biology textbook, evidence for evolution. This is not evidence for evolution. It's evidence for natural selection. It's evidence the designer of those moths was really smart. He gave them the ability to produce a variety of babies, so some will survive whatever background they land on. They can stay in a dark background or light background. That didn't explain how the moth came to be with its unbelievably complex gene code. One chromosome from a moth is more complicated than the space shuttle. And you think it happened by chance? The fact that, see, natural selection or artificial selection, either one, they both select. They don't create anything. But you want to give it creative capability. So definition of evolution is one that definitely needs to be worked on here. Evolution, the textbook says, the process by which different living organisms are thought to have developed and diversified from earlier forms. Okay? The gradual development of something, especially from a simple to more complex form. We don't see this, okay? Evolution is a gradual process that changes place over many generations, during which species of animals and plants and insects slowly change some of their physical characteristics. This is dreaming. This isn't observed. We see selecting the dark moths or selecting the light moths. That's not creating anything. That's not evidence for evolution. Evolution is defined as a change in inherited traits of a population of organisms through successive generations. I believe what happened with the peppered moth, the Industrial Revolution darkened the trees. The dark moths survived better, more camouflaged against the background of the tree. The birds couldn't find them. And so when they cleaned up their factories over there and the trees turned light again, the population shifted right back to mostly light moths. And today, it's mostly light-colored peppered moth. But today, they still have some dark ones. This is part of the normal gene code of the moth. It's got nothing to do with evolution. Sorry, try again.
All right. Thank you, Kent, for that roughly 2 to 3 minute response. Another skeptical guy, let's hand it back to you. Feel free to respond or rebut any point you'd like to.
Yeah, so absolutely. There were two populations of moths, and the white ones were eaten and the black ones stayed around. So that same mechanism is the same mechanism of how evolution works. They're the exact same mechanism. Both of those processes are the same. The trait there of the black colored moth was more suited to the environment in which the moth lived than the white color, right? So if the Industrial Revolution continued in the same level that it did, with soot covering everything, then we would expect to see absolutely no resurgence of the white moth, except in very rare cases, and a continuation of just the black moth. So that is a specific trait naturally selected to continue the line of moth, because every species, everything in nature always wants to survive. That's the goal of everything in nature, is survival. So that same mechanism could be extrapolated to explain how simple, primitive life forms, and Kent, I understand that you don't like the word primitive, but I'm just using that term to diversify it from saying, well, multicellular life forms, primitive life forms, how they became multicellular, more complex. You have one trait or a mutation that is beneficial, like in this case of the moths, the white trait, the black trait, and then that carries through. So I don't know how you can really say try again to that point, when the exact same, when that is an observed mechanism that we see through many different species, with various levels of importance, like bacteria being more resilient against vaccines, or perhaps mosquitoes being more resilient to insecticides. So we see it in moths, we see it in bacteria, we see in all these things of a good trait, of a beneficial trait, continuing through the line and then staying with that species. Why you need a new flu vaccine every year, because it's a new strain comes, a new mutation, a new resilience, etc. It is evolving, because it has a trait that is beneficial to that species that was not there previously, change over time, and now we need a new flu vaccine. So how can you say with intellectual honesty that that is not an example of evolution?
Okay, thank you for that response. We'll throw it back to Kent. And then, since this will be a few rounds of 2 to 3 minutes each, we'll transition into more of a free-flowing phase where we can ask each other direct questions and converse more so. So, Kent, you have 3 minutes for a response. Go ahead.
Okay, first of all, what happened with the peppered moth was not an example of a mutation. They already had dark moths and light moths, nothing mutated at all. The ratio of the population changed, a ratio of an already existing population of dark and light moths. Study it carefully. Nothing changed in the moth. The ratio of the population changed. You could find cities where the population is largely Native American, or largely African American, or largely Norwegian American, but it's the ratio of the population. So you're incorrect if you believe mutations had anything to do with the peppered moth. And there are no such things as a beneficial mutation that have been observed. Beneficial mutations are a dream. All mutations observed so far have been fatal or harmful or neutral. They do nothing. I'm not aware of any beneficial mutations. And it would take trillions of them to change an amoeba to a whale. So I'm sorry. You mentioned about change over time. This is always the god of the evolutionist, time. Given enough years, given enough billions of years, it'll work. So we see dark moths and light moths. Look at that, boys and girls. That's proof. If at billions of years, the moth would turn to a whale. That's the logic. For heaven's sake, skeptic guy, are you skeptical of what you've been taught on this topic, or just skeptical of creation? You should be skeptical of what they taught you, because this simply it's not observable. Science is what we can observe, study, and test. Do an experiment. You will find the peppered moths always make baby peppered moths. There are no exceptions. And it's not a mutation. That's it. So he said this is the same mechanism, what we see with the moth, that's going to drive other things. Well, then it's not going to go anywhere. the cars in park. It's not going to drive anything. All that happened was the ratio of the population was changed by natural selection. Because of the background of the trees, the birds could eat the white ones better when the trees were dark. That's all that happened. It didn't change anything in the moth. They already had some of each, dark and light. See what's happening here? We're getting a problem with the definition of the word evolution. And I go through on my video series the meanings of the word evolution. There are 6 different meanings. Cosmic evolution, the origin of time-space matter. All these first 5 are purely religious. The number 5 is what he's talking about. Macroevolution, changing from one kind of animal to another. The moth did not do that. It started a moth, it ended up a moth. So I'm sorry, that's not evidence for evolution. And as far as bacteria becoming resistant to antibiotics, it's still a bacteria. You have a colony of bacteria, say you got 1,000 bacteria, and 50 of them are resistant to some kind of antibiotic. So the person takes the antibiotic, all of them die except those 50, because they already had a resistance. Then they take over and they make a bunch of babies, and now you got a whole population of bacteria that are resistant to the antibiotic. It didn't create anything. Some of them already had the resistance. It doesn't create anything, and that's not evolution. That's in that case artificial selection. A person taking an antibiotic, killing off 95%, but not keeping the other 5 is the same as the peppered moth. You're right, it's the same mechanism, and it doesn't make anything evolve. But you guys have been taught, and you swallowed it. You should have been skeptical of that when they said this mechanism will change a moth to a whale over millions of years. You should have been skeptical of that. The other one used insecticides. You spray insecticides to kill the mosquitoes in your yard. Let's say you got 1,000 mosquitoes and 100 of them have a natural resistance to this insecticide. They've already got it before you started spraying. You spray the population, all of them die except those with the insecticide resistance. Then they make all the babies for the next generation. And after a couple of times of spraying, your spray does no good. And you're wondering what happened. The mosquito evolved a new resistance? No, some of them already had it. I'll tell you what, get your 1,000 mosquitoes and see if they're resistant to a sledgehammer. I bet you'll find none of them are resistant to a sledgehammer. You will wipe out the population if you can get them all. So the insecticide resist and bacteria antibiotic and the moth, what you've given so far is evidence of amazing design. God gave the creatures the ability to produce a variety of offspring. Some will survive no matter what happens, pretty much, except maybe a sledgehammer. Okay, so try again.
Thank you, Kent. Another skeptical guy. Let's do this. People in the audience saying they're enjoying this fast-paced format. So let's do another few rounds of this, since we got several points on the table to engage. So we'll throw it back to you. Another roughly 2 to 3 minutes for response. Go ahead.
Sounds good. So I don't believe I said that what happened with the peppered moth was a mutation. I did say mutation, but not in reference to the peppered moth. I believe I said that was a trait. So, right, you have a population of mosquitoes. You spray them with, so you've got 100 mosquitoes. You spray them with insecticides. 5 of them live. They reproduce, and then they produce another clutch spawn of mosquitoes with that same resilience in it, and that goes down the line. Different pesticides, whatever, and then all these traits that are within the mosquitoes, sure, they were there inherently. Fine, I won't contest that for the sake of this argument. I mean, I'm not super educated in bugs, but I will grant you that the traits are prevalent in the mosquitoes to begin with. So, but they might be more recessive or dominant. That's why some of them die. So they reproduce. They have other mosquitoes with these same traits that are resilient to the pesticides, and then more pesticides, and then more resilience, and more pesticides, and more resilience. And this goes all the way down the line. So how is this not a change? How is this not a change to the original genetic code if there's some difference in the DNA strands? But if you don't want to talk about that is fine. If you don't want to accept that is fine. But yes, a change in the DNA strand is an example of what the definition of evolution is in the scientific canon. Oh, and by the way, a moth would not have turned into a whale. They would have had a more common ancestor. I'm not sure what that one is off the top of my head, but it wouldn't have been a moth. It would have been something different. Sorry. So Kent doesn't want to accept those as evolution, which is fine. He asked for evidence. I provided him evidence. I can move on if he wants to try his chops at another. So we can talk about the fact that it's confirmed, evolution is confirmed by multiple forms of science, genetics, biology, geology, and they sort of add up to the same thing. And you said that time is an issue for evolutionists, or evolutionists, I'll say that term. But it's not, because we have many billions of years to do this, which, Kent, I understand you don't believe in, but radioactive decay would prove you wrong about that one. And if you want to talk about radioactive decay, I'm happy to go through the math of that derivative for you.
Okay, another skeptical guy. Appreciate it. We'll throw it back to Kent to engage your first couple minutes of points, and then since we have another topic possibly on the table, we can also get into that. So Kent, the floor is yours again. Go ahead.
Well, thank you. You asked, how is that not a change to their DNA code? It's still a moth. It's not. Nothing has changed in the DNA code with the moth or the mosquito you gave or the bacteria. Nothing changed in their DNA. They're still producing baby moths. Just now they produce more of their same color that they started with. I have blonde hair, Norwegian ancestry. If I had 500 kids, probably a large percent of them would have blonde hair, and and have those characteristic traits. If a person has dark-skinned African Americans, when they produce babies, they produce dark-skinned babies. It's not a change in the DNA. It's already in there. Nothing with DNA changed with the moth. And the moth does not have a common ancestor with a whale. You may believe that if you'd like, but that's a religion. I wish you could understand that's something you have to believe in. Just like billions of years is something you have to believe in. It's not observable. Nobody's observed any more than probably a couple hundred years in their lifetime. Some of the older people, 900 years according to the Bible. But okay, and you said if Kent's not going to accept that, skeptic guy, I accept science. You're the one that ought to be skeptical of what you believe. You believe this change in the moth there's no DNA change. It's a percentage of ratio of the population that changed, which is explainable by natural selection. But it selected something that was already there. How about, why didn't any of them turn blue or green or pink or grow 12 wings or get to be 15 feet tall? None of that happened. It's still a moth, still the same kind of moth, still the peppered moth. Okay. And so you said, you said you provided evidence. Baloney. You provided evidence that creation is true, is all you've done so far. You provided evidence that you don't have any evidence for evolution. You're desperate for these same things taught in the textbooks for the last 100 years, and they're all been proven wrong. The peppered moth it's not evidence for evolution. Neither is bacterial resistance, antibiotic resistance, or insecticide resistance. Okay, and you said it's confirmed by multiple lines of evidence. I think this is a sign of desperation. Just to say, well, there's lots of evidence for evolution. Well, show me a specific. You think geology is evidence for evolution? I taught earth science for 15 years. You work with logic in your work, I'm sure, logic in a line of work. They're telling the kids in school that the layers of the earth are different ages. You apparently believed it. Nobody should believe that. It's the dumbest theory ever. They say the layers are different ages. This was made up in 1830. Stop and think. If the layers are different ages, where's the new material coming from? Is this the top layer coming from outer space? All of these layers that we see in the earth formed in 1 year during Noah's flood. There is no geologic column. It does not exist. All over the world, petrified trees are found standing up, connecting all the layers. How long does a tree stand around in Virginia before it falls down after it dies? A couple of years. But petrified trees in the vertical position running through all these layers that you guys claim are different ages, they're common. There are thousands of them. petrified trees that are standing up. There's no way to explain this with each layer being different ages. And I go through this in my seminar of number 4 about the lies in the textbooks. The geologic column does not exist anywhere in the world except the textbook. Somebody taught it to you, you believed it. You should have been more skeptical of that. If the top layer is younger, where did it come from? How can it possibly be younger? If you shuffle a deck of cards, is the top card younger? If I shake up these sand art toys and it makes 10 layers of sand in here, which it will do in minutes, are the layers different ages? No, they're all the same age. They're all in here at the same time. There is no geologic column. I'm sorry you fell for that, but there isn't any. Doesn't exist. All the layers formed in one year, Noah's flood, just by the tide going up and down and shuffling the water back and forth. It's going to make all the layers in 1 year. There is no geologic column. Go ahead.
Thank you, Kent. Skeptical guy, back to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, so if we want to talk about where the layers came from, there are many answers. So you've got erosional processes, you've got animals dying and decaying. So that's usually where those are going to come from. However, we don't have to observe something directly to know it's true. So the math can help us calculate how we can radioactively date something, argon, carbon, whatever, and we can derive those numbers, those half-life equations, those the radioactive decay constants. We can calculate those. Just a little bit of knowledge of calculus and observation activity. Merit and Curie's and you taught chemistry. I'm sure you know about the molehill and the number of particles in a gram of whatever. So we can calculate those with pretty hard evidence based on observational science, which I know you like. I like. Math is also a descriptive force in which we understand the world, know science. So that's how we know that the layers are different ages, and the geologic column does exist. You can go to the Grand Canyon, you see all the layers. They have different ages. I know you don't like to accept the Grand Canyon is different ages, but you can calculate it. I mean, you can with the correct instrumentation calculate the activity, calculate the amount that's there, and you can figure it out. And then from the math, we can extrapolate the age of the fossils. And that is, for my money, that is the best evidence of evolution, which is the geologic column, and the fact that we don't see certain fossils in certain layers of rock. And I don't necessarily know if you have an answer to that one. I'm not sure. I'm sure you'll think of something, but that is how we know that the Earth is 6 million, many billions of years old, and we calculate that through hard math, which, like I said, I'm happy to walk through the derivation with you. But yeah, so that's my response there to Kent.
Okay, thank you. Another skeptical guy, and Kent, we'll throw it back to you. Floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I happen to love mathematics. I taught it for 15 years. It's called algebra, geometry, and trig, and I'll be glad to do the hard math with you if you would like. But I think you're missing the logic part that goes behind. Let's take carbon dating, or potassium, argon, or rubidium, strontium, or lead-208, lead-206. All the dating methods, carbon-14, carbon-13, all of them are based on a decay of a certain element that is radioactive. I understand it pretty well. Let's take the logical part. If you walked into a room and there's a candle burning on a table, and I asked you the question, when was it lit? How long has it been burning? You say, I don't know, Kent. It was burning when I got here. Okay, this is your example with a rock that has a radioactive element in it. We dig it up, we test how much carbon-14, how much carbon-12. That is very accurate. I don't argue with that at all. We can walk in, we can measure this candle. Let's do something, it's called empirical science. Let's measure how tall it is. We get micrometers and measure it to the nearest bazillionth of an inch and find out it's 7 inches tall. Nobody argues. Now we're going to measure something else, which we can measure. How fast is it burning? The rate of burn. We determine it's burning 1 inch per hour. So based on the hard math, we have a 7-inch candle. It is burning 1 inch an hour. When was it lit? You have no way to tell me unless you leave your hard math and go to some assumptions. How tall was it? We don't know. Has it always burned at the same rate? You can't possibly know that. You can dig up a rock and test how much carbon-14, how much carbon-12, or uranium, potassium, argon, whatever one you want to use. That's correct. It's hard math. No question. We know how fast it's decaying today. We know how much is in it today. We do not know what it started with, and we don't know the decay rate's always been the same. And when they get wild dates that fall all over the chart, they throw them out if they don't match the geologic column. So the geologic column, which does not exist, and you claim it does without any evidence, you claim it does, the geologic column is what determines whether their date is accepted or not. Radiometric dating would not have been feasible if the geologic column had not been erected first. Ever since, they said, fossils have been and still are the best and most accurate method of dating and correlating the rocks. So they date the rock layers by what fossils they're found in them. You mentioned that. The layers are dated by the fossils, not by the geologic, but not by carbon dating. He said, apart from very modern examples, I can think of no cases of radioactive decay being used to date fossils. This was 40 years ago. They still don't. They date the fossils by which layer they come from. They turn right around and date the layers by the fossils they find. I'll give you another logical conclusion since you're skeptical. If clams are generally found at the bottom of the geologic column, and they are, and there is no column, but if they're found at the bottom, the logic from the atheist is, well, clams evolved first. There's a much more logical reason. Maybe clams are at the bottom because clams already live at the bottom. They're the first ones buried. Hello, if there's a worldwide flood like the Bible says, the clams would be buried first. Maybe birds are found on top because they're the last ones to drown in a flood. And they have hollow feathers and hollow bones, and they're going to float around. Maybe the animals are sorted, based upon their body density, based upon their habitat, where they live. Maybe you don't find squirrel fossils with kangaroo fossils because they don't live together, okay? Maybe you don't find polar bear fossils with camel fossils because they don't live together. Maybe they're sorted based upon their mobility. It is not logical, and I wish you would be skeptical of what you've been taught. It is not logical to say that carbon dating, I'll go back to this one here, that means anything because it's based on the assumption that this rate of decay can be known to be always have been the same. They know there are things that affect the rate of radioactive decay. Here's a case where a lower leg of a mammoth was 15,000 years old, but the skin was 21,000 years old. Same animal. That was back in 1949. They're still getting wild numbers. Living mollusk shells dated at 2,300 years old. They're still alive. If a date supports our theories, we put it in the text. If it doesn't support it, we put it in the footnote. Freshly killed seal, carbon dated 1,300 years old. It doesn't work. It's based on wild assumptions. And I could go for 2 hours on this. Tell you what, Charles, I will send you my video number 7 if you'd like it, where I give all the examples of this. It's imagination. It's dream work. Hard math would tell us the hard math is going to fail when you get to the point where you can no longer observe. You have to make assumptions. How old is it? Well, let's assume it's billions of years old. If you want to talk about the age of the Earth, I've got all kinds of hard math ways to prove to you it cannot be billions of years old. I'll be glad to share those if you'd like. But you're claiming we have evidence from evolution from Grand Canyon. We'll cover that next time. I'm out of time. Grand Canyon probably formed in 1 week. It's a washed out dam. It has many, many layers. That's true. And those layers all formed in 1 year. And then if you closed up Grand Canyon today, a giant lake would back up behind it called Grand Lake. Look at the elevation lines. It would go back to Colorado. Be trillions of gallons of water backed up in Grand Lake if you just simply plugged up the canyon. I'll get pictures ready for that. You go ahead with your next evidence.
Skeptical guy, go ahead. Take as much time as you need to respond.
I was wondering if I could just ask Kent a question actually about the flood claims.
Sure. Yeah.
So the Bible talks about the global flood, And if my biblical knowledge is correct, the ark crashed into Mount Ararat. I'll let one of you guys correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think that's correct. Some mountain in the Middle East or some hill or whatever. And there were kangaroos on there. But kangaroos are only indigenous to Australia. How did the kangaroos get there? We don't see any kangaroos, any dead ones on that trip. We can say that there's a land bridge, a mini land bridge, but we don't see skeletons of kangaroos there that would be able to make that journey.
Donnie, is it my turn?
Yes, feel free to respond.
Sorry,
Sure.
Yeah, I should have said it.
Boy, I've got 50 or 60,000 slides. If you would ask the questions in the same order I've got the answers, it'd be a lot easier. But the animals got off the ark. The Bible says it landed in the mountains of Ararat, and then they would disperse from there. If you look at the globe, and I've got pictures of all this on my video number 6. I can't find my slides quickly enough, but people say, do you think the continents were ever connected? I say they're still connected right now. All the continents are connected right this minute. Some of the places are underwater, but they're still connected. If you took all the water off the planet, you'd see there's dirt underneath everywhere. Okay?
But they're separated by water.
Well, yeah. But between Australia and Vietnam, if you Google, just look at the continental shelf. The water in here is about 40 feet deep. If you lowered the oceans at 200 feet, everything would be connected. The English Channel is, 30 miles wide between England and France, and only about 100 feet deep from here to the back door. If you lowered the oceans a few hundred feet and froze all that water, if you made the ice caps bigger, which we know they were bigger, there's evidence clear down to Kansas City that there was ice age. If the ice caps were bigger, that makes the oceans smaller. That makes the continents larger, and the animals could walk anywhere. Between Russia and Alaska, the Bering Strait, so it's 60 miles wide, only about 100 feet deep. The oceans average 12,000 feet, average. Lowering the oceans 200 feet and freezing that water, sticking it on the North and South Pole, larger ice caps, shrink the oceans, enlarge the continents. I think the ice caps were huge at the end of the flood. And I cover in my video series where the ice age fits right into the beginning of the flood. When they got off the ark, they could walk anywhere. You could walk anywhere.
Wouldn't we expect to find fossils, bones of kangaroos at making that journey?
Fossils don't form today. How many animals died in the last 50 years? How many animals died in the last 5 years? Colonel Sanders killed millions of them to make chicken sandwiches out of them. So none of them fossilized. Animals aren't fossilizing today. Show me an example where we find mass graveyards of fossils. There's no question
enough time for them to liquefy.
Fossils don't form at all unless they're buried quickly under the right conditions. I think Noah's flood probably made nearly all of the fossils in the world in 1 year. Fossils aren't forming today. Show me where they're forming. There are herds of elephants, mammoths that are found fossilized. Thousands and thousands of mammoths, giant mammoth graveyards.
So
show me where they're happening.
You don't expect those bones to liquefy and become fossils?
Animals die.
Why would that? How? Yeah. So my question with that is, why would that not be the case? When we find bones, we see them fossilized. Why would we expect a different process to happen? Why would we expect it not to happen now? Why would we expect something that happened in the past to not carry to the future? As in, another example of this is the half-life. Why would we expect that to change? In your candle demonstration, why would we expect the rate of the candle to change? There's no evidence that it changes.
One question at a time. Okay. Animals die today by the millions. They are scavenged. The animals drag the carcasses all over the place to find fully articulated skeletons, all the bones still together. Thousands of dinosaurs are found buried in the drowning position with their neck arched back like they're trying to get one more breath. Their neck is up. All the bones are still together. If they had died and just laid there for even a week, they would have been scavenged. The buzzards would have picked people off, picked bones off. They wouldn't be articulated skeletons. There are millions of fully articulated skeletons. They had to be buried alive are buried quickly after death and preserved from scavenging. Animals today die and they're scavenged, and the bones themselves rot. We dumped a bunch of cow bones off here in our part of our tour, 2 years ago. They're already decaying badly. They'll be gone in 3 years. They'll turn to dust. And fossils don't form unless they're buried quickly. Noah's flood is the best explanation. But you're missing a bigger picture here. I'm not demanding that all the taxpayers pay for my religion. I believe Noah's flood is true, but I'm not demanding that be taught in public schools. You guys believe the kangaroos are related to mosquitoes, and you demand that be taught in public schools at taxpayer expense. We're all paying for your religion. I resent that. I'm going to fight that till I die. If you want to believe in evolution, you want to think kangaroos and mosquitoes are related, you believe whatever you want. But don't call it science, and don't put it in the public school textbooks. It's not science. It's a religion. You believe in that stuff. These family trees you guys teach are pure propaganda.
So people
No
who are Christian and believe in evolution have two religions, or does one discount the other?
Well, people can believe all sorts of things they want. People can believe crazy things, okay? You can be a Christian and believe in God and still believe some of the dumb things you were taught. Sure. That's why I'm here. I'm here to straighten you out, okay?
So with your castle bone demonstration, have you tried exposing them to heat and pressure and see what happens to the fossil, what happens to the bones for a long period of time?
We know fossils can't, we know animals, petrification can take place in a few years under heat and pressure, like you said. Would that mean they'd have to be buried deeply underground to get the pressure of all the weight above them to get that heat and pressure? Would that be something like Noah's flood would do? Bury them under hundreds of feet of sediment?
Yeah,
animals that die today don't get that. They don't get buried under hundreds of feet of sediment. We don't see fossils forming today anywhere.
It would still take longer than a year.
No. Google, how long does it take to petrify a bone? I know it's been done.
Fossilize.
Okay, fossilize, similar thing. A bone can be petrified, turned to stone, I think in less than a year, under heat and pressure. But you're not going to get that when it dies and lays on top of the ground. You're going to get scavenged. It's going to be dragged all over the place. They're going to chew the bones up.
So we get my dog out there. To the thing you said about the dinosaurs, arching their heads, gasping for breath. Do we see that in all fossils that are found? Or only some? Because if there's a worldwide flood, I would expect it to be all. And if it's not all, then something is very weird, or that dinosaur just died before that.
Okay, well, I hope you're still skeptical of what you believe also. If there was a worldwide flood, billions of animals would be buried, and some would end up on top. The ones on top are likely to be scavenged. The ones that are buried are likely to fossilize. I think you'll find a mixture of both because of Noah's flood. To say that the Noah's flood is invalid because some of the bones are not still articulated it's not logical reasoning.
No, it is. When you try to drown animals, no one.
I couldn't understand a word of that.
I said, if you try to drown animals, you would expect them to all try to gasp for breath, would you not?
Well, they might have died for various reasons before. They didn't all die by drowning. The Bible says the fountains of the deep broke open. There might have been volcanic activity burying them in hot ash. I'll watch the video when I get to heaven and find out what happened exactly.
Bury them in hot ash, and then the hot ash would have been.
Actually, Kent, before you answer that, I want to pause just for 10 seconds. Skeptical guy, can you do me a favor and click the settings button right next to it's right on the StreamYard, right next to where it says present?
Yes, I can.
Click the settings, go into the audio. I noticed you got that nice headset, so I want to make sure that the audio is coming through the headset. Can you click the?
It's probably doing my camera.
I think it sounds like it.
Is that better?
Yes, a lot better, and I think that's going to help.
your viewers, and to you, Kent, and to you, Donnie.
No worries. It happens frequently, actually. So that should reduce any echo or anything like that. Your mic just evolved. So if you can you reiterate your last point in question, and then we'll throw it back to Kent to respond?
Yeah. So my question was, Kent, you mentioned them being buried in ash, but then since the flood happened so quickly, wouldn't all the ash have been washed away by the flood? Or is it some special ash that doesn't get washed away by water?
Okay, I think during Noah's flood, there'd be a variety of things happening at the same time. I think there are volcanoes going off right this minute. Right this minute, there are probably, 200 volcanoes right now going off someplace in the world, and they're producing ash clouds that are settling within an effective radius of that volcano. Sometimes they go for miles, sometimes they go for, not very far. And so the animals that are buried near those volcanoes will be buried in ash, but 20 miles away, they won't be buried in ash. How can you not get it? Part of the world, the whole world was flooded, and there's volcanic activity at the same time. At the same time, there's underwater mudslides happening because the crust of the earth is broken up. The flood would do all kinds of things. A worldwide flood would be catastrophic over the earth. Some would be buried and drowned in water. Some would drown and float and end up getting scavenged. Some would drown and get buried and end up getting fossilized.
Get scavenged by what if all of the other creatures are underwater?
Well, bacteria are still going to be around. Bacteria weren't involved in this. Bacteria certainly scavenge all the carcasses that landed. And insects aren't mentioned as going onto Noah's Ark. They could survive on floating log mats. But you're going off track here. We're not here to defend Noah's flood. The title of the debate was, is there evidence for evolution?
And your only counter to the evolution is Noah's flood. So I'm going to bring it up. If you're going to bring it up, that's fair game for it to be questioned.
Oh, okay. But the topic of the debate is there evidence for evolution? For you to be skeptical of Noah's flood, you're welcome to be skeptical whatever you want. But you're off topic, because now I don't have to defend the Bible. I'm not demanding it be taught. You guys are demanding that evolution be taught in schools. You're demanding that all the kids are taught that they're related. Well, I'll show you here. Family tree. Here we have everything, and all the many forms of life on Earth are descended from a common ancestor. They make these family trees and say the humans and the pine trees have a common ancestor, and the sharks and the ferns and the starfish and the octopus. Do you believe this chart represents science?
Yeah.
Okay. Here we have a protozoa turning to a biology teacher. This is a public school textbook.
Are you trying to suggest that evolution says one protozoa turns into one person?
No. Trillions of protozoa turned into all the millions of people we have today. It's the same idea. It's still stupid.
All trillion of them turned into?
Oh, brother, come on. Why don't you be skeptical of what you're saying right now? Did single-celled creatures slowly evolve into humans? Textbooks say they did. Do you believe they did?
Yep.
Where's the evidence for that? Has anybody ever seen a single-celled creature, be it a bacteria, protozoa, amoeba, whatever? Has anybody ever seen one of those turn into anything other than a protozoa or a bacteria or an amoeba? Nobody ever sees this.
I do believe we see in some algae single cells becoming multicellular.
Well, the algae becoming multicellular, what happened? The algae became a colony that worked together. I think we've seen human beings get together and make an army. Okay, they're still individual human beings. It was single-celled creatures. And you think these single-celled algae getting together to make a colony is going to somehow turn them into a whale or a butterfly or a human? This is religion. This isn't science.
Ask your question again. If I believe that, I'm just going to reiterate, and you can tell me if I've got it.
Do you believe single-celled creatures, whichever one you want to start with, protozoa, amoeba, bacteria, I don't care. Do you believe single-celled creatures evolved into humans, like this chart showed?
Yeah, over billions of years. Yep.
Okay. Where is the evidence for this? There are certainly billions of protozoa today. Why don't they do it again? Let's see them evolve into something else. My contention is nobody in the history of the world has ever seen any animal or plant produce offspring that a 4-year-old would consider a different kind. The moth example you gave, ask a 4-year-old. They're going to point to both of them and say, that's a moth and that's a moth. It didn't change from a protozoa. There is no evidence for these family trees. This is artwork. This is a bunch of lines on paper is all it is. This is deceitful. This is propaganda. This is stupid. Real stupid.
So you think those lines are just drawn helter-skelter, willy-nilly, based on no basis for anything? Why would someone do that?
They're on drugs.
What? How can you just say so? All the thousands of scientists who did that, they were all on drugs, all of them?
I don't know. It must have been, because they all got these stupid charts showing. Let's see. I'll back it up for you. Here they have. This is the most common one right here, the tree of life. Yep. humans and whales and birds and dogs and lions and everything. Everything came from a common ancestor. This is what is taught. Hey, Bobby, in the Jeep between my seats is with this chart, the bigger version laminated. Let me have one up here, please, okay? I say, this is propaganda. This isn't observable science. This one has a ladybug related to a human being. Do you believe you're related to a ladybug?
Related through a common ancestor, yeah.
Okay, good. Do you have any evidence for that? Would it be okay for me to...
The fact that my cells and the ladybug cells are pretty much identical. I think it's like what, like we're 60% related to, I believe 60% related to a banana, genetically identical to a banana, and then various degrees as you get your common ancestor gets nearer and nearer to you.
I think the fact that there is similar DNA in each of these creatures is evidence of a common designer, and there's similar proteins in these creatures, so that it's a one big network. We can I can eat the brown cow can eat the green grass and turn it into white milk, and I can drink it and give it blonde hair. That's proof of an amazing design. Recycle everything. It's not proof of a common ancestor with the cow and the grass. It's proof that God designed the world the way he did so everything could be interrelated. That's just that one right there. Thank you, ma'am. Just one of them. Keep one in the Jeep. Oh, you got two. Okay. This is the kind of stuff they teach the kids in public school. Here we go, boys and girls. Origin of life, a single-celled creature slowly turned into everything. A whale and a bird have a common ancestor. You can tell everybody who believes that is stupid. Thus saith Kent Hovind.
So Kent Hovind saying no is worth more than the thousands of scientists who did painstaking research to make these relationships. Yes, is that the claim that we're operating with?
On this particular example, absolutely. You get all those thousands of scientists, I'll debate them all, one at a time or all at the same time. Nobody sees any scientific reason to draw these lines on paper.
Except we do.
We don't ever see I'll get the simple chart here. We don't ever see a turtle produce a non-turtle.
Evolution doesn't say we will.
Well, they've got turtles coming from a common ancestor with a frog.
Haven't you been corrected on that thing, on that statement that we don't believe that evolution says a turtle will produce a non-turtle, or a dog a non-dog, or a cat a non-dog? You know that's a straw man of evolution. You know, right, that's not at all what evolution says will happen.
Charles, I've never been corrected on that because I wasn't wrong. It's true, turtles only produce turtles and dogs produce dogs. But you've got this chart that you believe in that says a protozoa turned into a human and a whale and a monkey. Nobody's ever seen a protozoa produce a non-protozoa. Why would this chart be science? You say I've been corrected when I say turtles don't produce non-turtles. That's correct. Turtles don't produce non-turtles. And protozoa don't produce non-protozoa.
And evolution doesn't say that they will.
This chart shows right here.
No, it doesn't.
The protozoa
not what that chart.
Everything.
I promise you, Kent, that's not what that chart is showing you.
Okay. These textbooks show a single-celled creature, be it a protozoa, an amoeba, or whatever, single-celled creature, produced everything. Nobody ever sees a single-celled creature produce anything other than a single-celled creature baby. So this chart is pure artwork. It's propaganda. It's a lie. It's stupid. And I'll debate them all one at a time, line them up, or all at the same time. Little old Kent Hovind with his sling is going to take on Goliath. Yes, if all the scientists believe that they came from a rock or a protozoa or an amoeba, I'm calling them stupid right to their face. That's stupid to believe such a thing. Shame on you for not doubting and being skeptical of these charts. A protozoa turning into an octopus and a pine tree and a shark. That's not science. That's religion. You guys believe over billions of years it would happen. Okay.
But it's evidence-based, not faith-based. And you can deny the evidence all you want. Your only evidence for your religion, which is a religion, is the Bible, which is just full of cyclical reasoning, while evolution is based on hard math and science, which I have gone over, and I've provided examples. There are more that we didn't have time to go into, much to my chagrin, but we didn't have time to go into them. But the eyewitnesses to evolution, you like observing. We talked about the peppered moths. We talked about the mosquitoes. We talked about bacteria. And so you saying, no, that's not evolution, that's something inherent, is not at all a defense to that. You would have to show me something that would disprove that, oh, all of the bacteria from now on are going to have this same resistance, which largely they do. So same thing with the mosquitoes. They become resistant to the pesticides. The bacteria become resistant to the antibiotics, and that's why we have to have new ones. And then that is a trait, inherited trait, that goes down through the rest of the generations.
Okay, you said I deny the evidence. You've not shown any evidence. You've shown evidence that the peppered moth turned into a peppered moth. And I think we've seen for hundreds of thousands of years, maybe, if whoever's watching the moths over there in England, they probably got a government project to do that. The moths always make baby moths. But the charts will show the baby moth, the moth related to a whale. That's what they show.
That same mechanism is how we understand this idea of a primitive unicellular organism evolving, or not gaining more beneficial traits that help it to survive in a generally hostile environment.
Okay.
That same mechanism. Why would that same mechanism that helps this moth survive, that helps these bacteria survive, that help this mosquito survive, not be the same in the past?
Okay.
Why would
it was the same in the past, but the mechanism is it already had the DNA code to make that color. If that's a mechanism you're relying on, then you lose, because the moth will never change to anything but a moth. The mechanism
say it will, nor does evolution say it will.
Evolution says the moth came from an amoeba. You believe the moth came from an amoeba. You believe you're related to a moth.
An amoeba,
and yet you have no evidence for that.
That's a nebulous term. I wouldn't wager
a single cell tree. Sure. There is no evidence of a moth. You said, I don't deny the evidence. I love evidence. I've been asking for some. What you gave with this moth is not evidence for evolution. It's evidence that the designer was pretty smart.
So what would you as evidence?
Show me the moth turn into something else. Did you know General Motors puts heaters and air conditioners in some of their cars? I've driven them. Is that proof that they plan ahead? Because they don't know if it's going to hot climate or cold climate. Yeah, that's planning ahead.
So man-made objects are analogous to biological organisms in this case?
This biological organism is trillions of times more complicated than anything General Motors ever built, okay? Or Ford or Honda or Mercedes. The peppered moth is more complex than the entire space program put together. The peppered moth DNA, the DNA is a 6-foot strand coiled up into a little bitty tiny ball that copies itself, makes a replica of itself. Google DNA replication. I'm sorry somebody brainwashed you into believing that could happen by chance, but you need to stop and once you start being really skeptical. Yeah, I know you're skeptical of the Bible. That's fine. Now turn that same skepticism onto evolution.
I know you won't believe me, but I did, and I came to this conclusion. Right? Why all of the organisms in life are so similar.
Right. I agree.
Are so similar. And if they were created, why would dolphins and whales not have gills? And that's just one example. There are more. Why would they have gills?
Dolphins and whales go up above the water to breathe. We call them a mammal. They don't care what we call them, okay? Dolphins look for another dolphin to mate with. They don't care. They look for a mosquito or nothing else. So this whole classification system done by Carolus Linnaeus and other people, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, it's all man putting his classification onto the creatures. They don't care.
You say that they're not mammals?
They don't care. We've decided to make a list of qualifications for a mammal, and they fit that qualification of our list. But they don't care what we classify them. Whales and dolphins are considered mammals by man's classification system. Now, dolphins classify humans as stupid for believing they came from a rock. That's how they classify us, but they don't tell us that. They just get up and laugh at us. Watch them. Watch Flipper, okay? You believe you came from a rock. So these family trees are not science. This is artwork. This is somebody drawing lines on paper. There is no scientific evidence of any of this. It's propaganda is all it is. If you wish to believe it, that's fine. I don't care. Believe what you want. So don't call it science.
If so, let me just get some biblical understanding here. God created everything and said it was perfect, right? Yes, that's a general idea in Genesis before the flood.
God said everything was perfect, but let me qualify. I think God gave all of the creatures an amazing DNA code that has a great flexibility. Dogs can produce big dogs or little dogs. I think man has selected those genes to make little useless chihuahuas and great big Great Danes, but there's a limit. They're never going to get a dog as big as Mount Everest. Okay, there's a limit. They're never going to get a dog as big as a whale, but there are
a
animals.
Physical limit or a biological limit?
I don't know. There's certainly physical and biological limits. We don't see this. But we know there's still a dog. Ask any dog breeder. They'll tell you, sure, there's 339 recognized breeds of dogs now in America, and they probably had a common ancestor called a dog. But they want to make these charts and say the dog is related to the crab and the pine tree. That's not science. It would be science to say the Chihuahua is related to the Great Dane. I'll go along with that. There are, 8 different kinds of squirrels that probably had a common ancestor called a squirrel.
So what about dog and wolf? Are those related? Would you say
I
those
think
are
dog,
related?
wolf, coyote. Now, see, whether the word related, you got to be careful with that word related, okay? But dogs, wolves, coyotes probably had a common ancestor. That doesn't mean dogs and tomatoes do. You believe dogs and tomatoes had a common ancestor?
Do I believe that? Well, presumably it would be the same as my ancestor, the Leica, last eukaryotic common ancestor. It'd be the same.
Okay. I'm going to see if this chart has tomatoes on here. I'm sure it's on here somewhere. Sunflowers. Do sunflowers and sharks have a common ancestor? This textbook says they do.
Probably also the Leica, last eukaryotic common ancestor.
I didn't understand a word of that.
Last eukaryotic common ancestor, Leica.
Okay, eukaryotic. The fact that they're eukaryotes is again a common design of the cell structure. Does it have a nucleus wrapped in a membrane or not? Is the DNA floating freely in there? Does it have a cell membrane? Does it have a cell wall? Again, those are classifications man is putting on the creatures. We've decided to put the screwdrivers over here and the hammers over here.
But why do we classify them like that? You say it's willy-nilly. I say it's not.
Okay.
Why we classify dolphins as mammals because they are so closely related to mammals and not fish. And I think that's the confusion for a lot of creationists that they live in water.
Related. The word related is one you got to be careful of. Related is based upon the assumption that evolution is true. I don't think man is related to the apes. Apes make baby apes all the time, every time. Baboons make baby baboons, nothing else. Humans make baby humans. There are no exceptions to this. Now, if you wish to imagine and believe religiously that millions of years ago there was a common ancestor, that's your religious belief.
Not a belief, it's evidence-based.
No, well, you can believe that. I believe it's evidence-based that there doesn't happen, okay? All the evidence we've seen tells us dogs produce dogs. Nobody's ever seen anything else.
And evolution doesn't say a dog will produce a non-dog.
Well, here we go. 339 breeds of dogs, according to the American Kennel Association, or whatever they call that thing, okay? God said they'd always bring forth after their kind. God said this 24 times in the first 7 chapters of the book. Do you know of any examples where an animal did not bring forth something that would be considered the same kind? I don't know of any. I taught biology for years. Nobody's ever seen an animal produce something other than their kind. Dogs make dogs, without exception.
What is a kind? Can you define that? Not with an example.
Got it right here. Definition of a kind. Here we go. The word definition of the word species in biology is a type, a kind, a sort, a genus, a family. This is, again, man classifying things. When you classify the screws and nails in our toolbox, in our shop, sometimes you come into some problems. There are some spiral shank nails. Whoa, is that a screw or a nail? Well, it doesn't have, you got to hammer it in, so we'll call that a nail. But it's got a spiral shank. They don't care how we classify them. Neither do the animals. Kind or sort is one of the definitions of species. Wow. A group of animals that actually or potentially could interbreed in nature.
So a species is a kind. Species
and kind are very similar. But see, the word species is man's classification system. There are 26 different definitions of the word species. I've got them all right here if you'd like to read them. Definition of species. on organisms that can reproduce naturally with one another. National Pornographic. Okay, species, Webster Dictionary, a kind or a sort. Wow, look at that. They'll tell you species.
So you told me what a kind is by defining the word species.
Okay, I'll tell you what the kind is. According to the Bible, they can bring forth. A dog and a wolf can bring forth a baby, a puppy. A dog and a pine tree cannot. A dog and a squirrel cannot. A dog and a dolphin cannot. So they're different kinds.
Clade, like a clade, right? Yes.
Well, again, clade, kingdom, phylum, mass, order, family. How you want to family? It doesn't matter what we call them. They know what their kind is, and dogs always produce dogs. To this day, scientists struggle with the definition of a species. They're fighting over the definition. Scientists struggle to determine what the species is. What is it? There's no general agreement among biologists on what species are, says a biologist at Southern Utah University. At last count, there are 26 published concepts in circulation. What is a species? They still don't know. I don't have to define a kind. I'm not asking the Bible to be taught in public schools. But you guys are claiming that these charts are somehow science, and we should teach this to all the kids, that they're related to a ladybug. Would it be okay for me to step on a ladybug? That'd be okay, wouldn't it? Would it be okay for me to step on you and kill you?
I mean, there are many religions that say it's not okay to step on a ladybug.
Oh, well, I think they're crazy, okay? I hit them all the time with my car. If they're dumb enough to get in the way of the windshield, that's on them.
Ladybugs. Sorry, I thought you said you hit people of other religions with your car. I was very confused.
Well, see, this is where would it be okay? Would it be okay for you to go next door and kill your neighbor's baby and eat it?
No.
Well, the lion does it to the zebra every day.
Sure, yeah. And we kill cows every day to eat them.
Well, hold it. They got right here on this chart, zebras and humans have a common ancestor. How come it's wrong for humans to go next door and kill the baby and eat it, but it's okay for the lion to do that to the zebra? What happened here?
Because we have the innate desire to survive. Survival of the fittest.
So does the zebra. They want to survive, but the lion eats them.
Absolutely. But does the zebra also not have defense mechanisms against the lion? Or the tiger, whatever you said?
The zebra apparently doesn't have enough. The lions seem to eat them all the time. And the poor grass. Now, the zebras eat the grass. The grass has no defense mechanism. Just stand there and take it like a man, or grass, or whatever they are.
Except it can reproduce extremely fast.
Grass is what now?
I said grass can reproduce extremely fast.
So therefore, it's okay to kill it and eat it. Okay.
So well, no, you said it doesn't have a defense mechanism. I said what its defense mechanism is.
Again, I wish you could understand. We don't observe any of these lines on paper being justified. This one has a ladybug and a frog and a zebra and a human having a common ancestor. Somebody drew a bunch of lines and they used colored pen to do it too. Wow, green lines and orange lines. Now it becomes science. Now these guys only use black and white lines, so they're black lines. I'm sorry, that isn't quite as scientific. But they have the protozoa, the protists, turning into the fish and the humans, everything. You guys believe this. The title of the debate topic tonight is there evidence for evolution?
Who is you guys? I want to know who this nebulous you guys are. Skeptics? Evolution believers? Atheists?
Are you skeptical of these charts at all?
Absolutely.
Good.
And they get better. Isn't that wild that they get better with every publication of a scientific textbook?
Well, they get more color. They get
better.
That
one that you just flashed by was from 1994. That I'm going to go ahead and say that's a little bit out of date.
I didn't hear that. It's a little bit out of what?
Out of date. I think the year said 1994.
This one?
No. I was on your slide. You flashed back. It said 1994 or something.
Okay. Well, I got slide 1994 textbook. It hasn't changed. Here's a 2020 textbook. I can show you. They're still teaching the same thing. This textbook said in 1994, all the many forms of life on Earth are descended from a common ancestor. Do you still believe that? Has that changed? Do they still believe that?
Yeah.
Then what are you worried about the date for? They're still teaching it. It's still the same stupid idea.
Okay, but the evidence contained in the books, the charts that are just, according to you, randomly drawn, which aren't randomly drawn, they're backed up by the evidence, by the phylogeny, by the genetics. It gets better with increased instrumentation, better technology, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know why you keep harping on the textbooks and saying that, oh, they say this. It's like, sure, but sometimes it gets a little better. Sometimes that's the nature of science. The nature of science is it naturally changes. It's a self-correcting process. Creationism isn't.
I will tell you, the artwork is getting better. The printing is getting better. We now have high-resolution printers, and so they're telling the lie more accurately as far as better printing and better colors, and they got sharper lines on the paper, but it's still stupid. Nobody sees a cow produce a non-cow. Sharks make baby sharks. There are no exceptions.
How many times do I have to say I agree with you that a cow won't produce a non-cow? Will you stop saying it? Evolution doesn't say that will happen. I don't say that would happen. No one teaches that evolution says that will happen. Why do you keep saying the cow non-cow thing?
Because they've got the cow connected to a ladybug and a snail on their charts, and yet they don't reproduce anything other than a cow. How
the
can
cow
you not
connected through what? Another cow? Is it another cow? I don't think it's another cow.
Do you think a cow came from a non-cow somewhere back in the distant past?
Come from? That's a weird word. So, like,
descended.
According to the law of modify, it's never going to outgrow whatever it was before. That's why trees and me and you and all animals are eukaryotic.
How can you not see the contradiction of what you just said? If they can't outgrow their ancestry, how did the amoeba outgrow
Is it still
his?
a eukaryote?
Well, here we go. They got the amoeba, the protozoa, whatever you want to use, protozoa, amoeba, it doesn't matter. The single-cell creature turned into everything. This protozoa outgrew its ancestry. Wow.
Or are they all still eukaryotic?
That means nothing. That means a cell structure thing, the eukaryotes. So they got the same cell structure. That doesn't prove a common ancestor. You're completely avoiding the question, Your Honor. This witness is evading the question. Do you believe the protozoa turned to all these things on the chart and did it outgrow it's no longer protozoa? You're saying, well, it's still eukaryotic.
Protozoa? Are we back on once again? I am not a microbiologist, so I could not tell you if we came from a protozoa or an amoeba, but I'll say single cell, I'll say eukaryotic cell. We are still all eukaryotic cells.
Well, battleships and forks are both made of iron. Does that prove they evolved from each other?
Man-made. They are man-made. They are not biologic. They are not.
Well, whether it's man-made or God-made, we don't see these changes. You guys believe that the humans and the fern ought to have a line drawn between them. You believe the shark and the fern and the starfish and octopus had a common ancestor. I'm just saying that's not science. Here we have, is there a cow on this one? I'll tell you what, I will draw my own chart and put a cow on there just for you, okay? The cow, they've got it related to everything. Cows, mollusks, slugs, butterflies, spiders. This isn't science. This is propaganda. I'm sorry you fell for it, but it's all nothing but propaganda. It's a chart that somebody drew. We don't ever see protozoa produce non-baby protozoa. And some of them have a generation time of 8 hours. Get born, grow up, get married, have babies, 8 hours. You can see 3 generations in one day. So one scientist in 50 years could watch probably several million generations. I don't know, take 3 a day times, 365.244 and 2422, days in a year, counting leap year. And you can see a lot of generations in one lifetime. Nobody has ever seen what is represented by this chart. It's not science. You're supposed to present evidence tonight that there's scientific evidence for evolution. The peppered moth doesn't do it. The resistant to bacteria doesn't do it. The mosquitoes becoming resistant to pesticide doesn't do it.
Well, they do because they meet the understood and codified definition of evolution.
I think if you studied the history of science, you would have to agree there have been hundreds of times where all the scientists were wrong. And like the Wright brothers said, we're going to get a heavier than air machine to fly through the air. Everybody said, can't be done. Everybody was wrong, weren't they?
Everyone
the Wright brothers were right. That's why they're named Wright brothers. Okay, otherwise they'd be the wrong brothers. But they believed a heavier than airplane could fly through the air, and they did it. And they're still doing it. I flew one over here today. So I think that there have been many times in history where all the scientists believe something that wasn't true. We have that example going on right now today. Not all, but a lot of scientists believe they're related to a protozoa. You tell them Kent Hovind said they're wrong. I'll straighten them all out. I'll debate them all, one at a time or all at a time. You haven't given any evidence tonight for this chart other than you believe it happened long ago and far away. You're relying on an unseen...
Far away?
Okay, long ago. That's an unseen force that time can do something that we don't see happen today. Well, we don't see it happening, but it happened in the past.
Yep.
Okay, that's a religion.
And there is the nuclear physics proves that we have that much time. You don't deny that. The math shows that we do through derivatives, through a lot of calculus. Generally, we get that radioactivity constant, radioactive decay constant. Calculate the half-life. You go from there.
Okay.
So,
for the sake of argument tonight, I will give you trillions, quadrillions of years.
Okay.
I think I can prove that's wrong, but we don't see any changes like this. We see the peppered moth that already had a resistance to the bird seeing it on light background. The dark moth stuck out like a sore thumb on the light background. He didn't make it. Some did. The genes were still preserved, but it's still a moth. That didn't change it to anything else. Donnie, we've gone an hour and a half. Are we going to get audience questions here?
Yes. I was trying to find a good time to interrupt the two of you. You've been very fast-paced, engaging. We'll have to do a round 2, a round 3, round 10. Who knows? This was fun. So, okay, let's do some live audience questions, gentlemen, for the last half an hour of this debate. So good job to the both of you. Let me start bringing people in. And just to let the audience know, the link is pinned in the chat currently. And so whether you're a creationist or an evolutionist and you want to come in for Q&A, you have a question or a challenge, an objection, something like that, please do click the link and just make sure to keep it professional. Okay, so what we're going to do is go around the room with the guests that we currently have. And I do want to make sure that we're sticking, excuse me, to questions. And so questions end in question marks. I just want to make sure we don't have any lectures or monologues or anything like that going on. And that way we can move around the room rather smoothly. And so we've already got a room of 9. Okay, so let's start with first one in the room, I believe, is Robert Jenkins. So Robert Jenkins, appreciate you joining, and give yourself a real brief intro. Make sure to unmute and let us know who the question is for, and then feel free to present that question. Robert, go ahead.
Oh, yes, sir. Gratitude, Donnie Badinsky, and God bless you all, by the way. I hope you all have a blessed night. And I'm a young earth creationist, believer of Christ. You know, I strive to follow in his footsteps every day. And my question is for another skeptical guy. Ken Hovind, he gave an example about how, like, basically he was saying, the example was saying how just because two things have similarities doesn't mean they're related. And another skeptical guy, you said man-made, but that's irrelevant, right? Because the principle is that just because two things are related doesn't mean like they're the same or they came from one another.
Did I miss the question there? Is he?
Oh, I think Robert might have accidentally dropped. I think he's on his phone, but he is back. Just one second.
Okay.
Robert, we thought you got raptured there for a second, but you're back with us.
Yeah, that would be awesome. But yeah, I'm back. I'm sorry about that.
No worries. If you wanted to reiterate your question for skeptical guy, go ahead.
Oh yeah, my question was merely how skeptical guy, he was saying how what Kent said, Kent's example was man-made, but my response to that in the form of a question is don't you believe that's relevant? Because the principle still applies. Just because two things aren't related doesn't mean. I mean, just because his example was basically saying just because two things are related doesn't mean that they came from one another or are the same.
So I don't think I ever claimed that because two things are related, they came from one another. I believe my claim was that they will share some common ancestry. That is the claim. As for the man-made thing, why I think that's not relevant, I guess one of the biggest reasons for why that's not relevant is the cell story, not cell structure. The compounds in the in man-made objects and organic objects. You've got the you've got organic compounds, organic molecules in cells. You don't have that in inorganic compounds. Different lattice structures. You've got cyclocarbons in organic, and overall organic systems are generally more complex, and that's why we have inorganic strata before we have any organic strata. So it's that level of organization that differentiates the two, and why I don't think that it's relevant to the conversation.
Okay, let's now hand it to Kent in case he had any thoughts. Kent, any thoughts, brother?
I'm glad he said something a minute ago. I don't think he understood what he just said. Or organic things are more complex than man-made things.
Yep.
I agree. A single cell protozoa is more complex than a Corvette Stingray. Way more complex. Nobody with one brain cell functioning would believe the Corvette could make itself, but you believe the single cell creature made itself over millions of years. Could the Corvette make itself over billions of years by rattling parts in a parts factory? No. You see that a man-made object has to have a designer, but you don't see that a single cell had to have a designer. Are you afraid of the designer for some reason? I don't understand. What are you running from?
Afraid of the designer? I see no evidence of a designer. It's the organization of the organic compounds and the organization of the inorganic compounds that is completely different. Organic compounds generally have the ability to organize themselves differently. Inorganic doesn't. They can't do that. There are chemists who can probably give a more salient answer than I can, but that is my understanding of that, of why it's not relevant to say, because we don't see this with inorganic compounds, inorganic material. Therefore, we can't see it with organic material. It's apples and oranges, the two completely different fonts of chemistry
Go ahead, Kent.
I'm muted
Okay.
somewhere. Okay. Yeah. We don't. You said organic compounds can organize themselves. They can reproduce themselves. A Corvette can't reproduce itself. It can't organize itself. So the living things, every living thing that we see, from a protozoa to a whale, is so complex. Humans have 11 systems: skeletal system, muscular system, digestive system, balance system, reproductive system. They all are interrelated. They all work together. And you don't think it had a designer. But you look at a Corvette, which has, let's see, a braking system, a transmission system, a propulsion system, some kind, and nobody would dream that made itself. But you think the human, which is a quadrillion times more complex than a Corvette, just made itself over millions of years. See, this is why I constantly say time is what cures everything for you guys. You think over millions of years. Let's see, here's your God right here. Oh, magic ingredient, wrong slide. You think time is going to do it. Oh, DV, sorry about that. Here is the magic ingredient for the atheist: time, mutations, which are all bad, detrimental. Nobody's seen a good one, but they somehow think it's going to change into something else. I'm sorry, I got too many slides open here at the same time. So I wish you could see that there simply is no evidence of this happening. If you wish for it to happen, great. If you believe it happened, I don't mind. I don't care what you believe. But I do resent you guys calling your religion a science, and I do resent you making everybody pay for it to be taught in the school system when it's not science at all. It's a religious belief. You believe the human beings came from an amoeba, and we have a common ancestor with a snail. Great. Believe that all you want. Start a private school, start a religious school, and teach evolution to those who want to learn that dumb religion. Go ahead.
Okay, gentlemen, I know we could go at this all day, but let's move to the next person now. I do appreciate it. And since we just had a creationist, let's bring in someone on the evolution side. F4BE1, first time here on the Standing for Truth platform, I believe. So I just wanted to quickly have yourself, if you could, give yourself a brief intro and then ask Kent your question.
Oh, okay, so can everybody hear me right now?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. So basically, I'm F4B1. You can call me whatever you like, pronounce it however you will. There's no correct or wrong pronunciation. So I'm basically on the side of evolution. I've been watching these debates, sometimes on your channel, Donnie, sometimes on other people's, they do like recaps of their debates on this channel. And I've just been always interested in this subject. So I just wanted to ask, there's like a lot of questions actually I want to ask. So I kind of wanted to ask Kent, so you defined species. Sorry, I had to mute my mic while you're doing that. But what I heard was you defined a kind as being if two individuals can bring forth, they are the same kind, correct?
I'm only getting part of this. Is pretty garbled. The Bible says if they can bring forth, they're the same kind. Now, where that line is, I don't know where that line is. And burden of proof is not on me to prove that. The burden of proof is on the evolutionist who thinks this doesn't happen, that the potatoes are related to the whales. Do you believe you're related to a potato?
Well, the burden of proof, the Bible is making a claim that if two creatures can bring forth, they bring forth after their kind. That is a positive claim, and that there is a burden of proof attached to that. But nonetheless, just going off of, so if two individuals can't bring forth, or if two individuals of population, of course there'll be like issues with like infertility. Some individuals are like impotent, they can't bring forth. But if two populations, they cannot interbreed, they are not the same kind. Is that correct, or would that be? Would you like to say anything different to that?
Well, proving or disproving the biblical definition of kind is irrelevant to this debate. You guys believe every living creature on the planet, everything came from a common ancestor. And the title of the debate is, where's the evidence for evolution? I admit, I believe the Bible clearly says they're going to bring forth after their kind. I'm unaware of any examples where that hasn't happened. As far as exactly what's a kind, well, most people put species and kind as a similar terms. It would be a synonym. Definition of species: a type, a kind, a sort. Is it the same as genus? Is it the same as species? I don't think the animals care, at all, how we classify them. And our classification system might not fit some of the cases. They're always having to reclassify plants and animals. Wow, that goes in a different genus. I don't care. They don't care, okay? Here we go. Definition of species: a kind or sort. The Bible uses the word kind or sort 24 times in the first 7 chapters. Can you give me an example of a plant or an animal that made a baby that would not be considered the same kind or sort? Do you have any examples of that?
Well, quickly, I'd just like to say with the species definition, you're going off the colloquial one, which is used just in random conversation. If you look at the dictionary under the biology tag in like big little gray box, it will say something different. But I just want to know because you say evolution, for it to be somewhat true, you'd have to find a case where a species or a kind becomes something else other than its kind. So I just want to know what the criteria for that would be in advance before I would give any examples, just as a safe measure. So no finicking and no smudging of the goalposts can occur.
Okay, well, you have to find a case. Look at me. You'd have to find trillions of cases, not a case. There'd have to be trillions and trillions of cases where we see animals produce something other than their kind to make these stupid family trees true. They're claiming on the family tree that's taught in the textbooks for the kids, boys and girls, you are related to a ladybug. They're the ladybug and the human, common ancestor. I just point out, Your Honor, this is not science. It would take a whole lot of more than a case of an amoeba producing a non-amoeba to make this chart science. Here we have it, protozoa. I'll call it up for you. Protozoa turning to a biology teacher. There isn't even one example of a protozoa making a non-baby protozoa. But yet you think it's okay to teach this to the kids as part of science. This is propaganda.
Well,
this is stupid, real stupid to believe a human came from a protozoa. Now, I don't object. I don't object to people being stupid. You can believe whatever you want, but don't call it science. It's polluting science. Science means what do we know by observation, experimentation, and testing. That's science. There is no experiment or testing or observation to show a protozoa turning to a fish and a bird and a human. That's not part of science. Shouldn't be in a science book at all.
Okay, well, I think I might have an example of a species sort of specification that would align with not being in the same kind, but I'll just like a definition real quick. There's like a concrete definition that a kind means that two populations or two groups or like individuals, if they can't bring forth together, they are not of the same kind. Is that correct? Or would you add like more caveats to that?
Well, the kind and species words are used interchangeably. As I mentioned, there are 26 different definitions of species now.
I'm asking for kind.
Species. I don't need to provide a foolproof definition of kind. I'm not demanding my religion to be taught in the schools. You guys are trying to shift the
This is not really talking about what is to be demanded in schools. We're trying to figure out what the truth is here.
I'm going to jump in real quick. I appreciate the line of questioning just so we can move along smoothly and have enough time. Kent, let's throw it to you. We'll give you the last word since it's your question. Then we'll move to the next guest.
He was garbled in the British accent. I couldn't understand half of what he said. But there are no examples of any animal or plant ever in history producing a baby that anybody with a brain cell would think is a different kind or species. Man has decided to make this species definition. And we might say, wow, that's a new species. Well, that's somebody deciding that. Somebody decided a dog and a wolf are a different species. The dogs don't care. The dogs did not decide that. Dogs and wolves can interbreed. Dogs and coyotes can interbreed. Okay, it happened. Dog breeders will say there's lots of varieties of dogs. Big dogs, little dogs. Okay, biggest dog ever, 343 pounds. Okay, littlest dog ever, let's see, where's the littlest dog? There he is, 3.8 inches tall. It's still a dog, barely. And I don't think they're interfertile anymore because of mechanical reasons, but maybe technically they would be. But see, there are limits to the dog. There are limits to the dog. And there's still a dog. Dog, wolf, and coyote can all interbreed. I got charts on that somewhere here. But they want to put the dog and say it's related to a butterfly. Seeing a dog and a wolf and somebody says, wow, we got to put that in a new species. That's a man deciding that. Okay, it's now a new species. It doesn't prove they're related to butterflies. Question everything. I agree, including evolution. They don't question that. Wolf diversity, 14 kinds of coyotes. Wow. All the dogs, wolves, and coyotes, I wouldn't argue. They had a common ancestor. But that doesn't mean they're related to sweet potatoes. But you guys cannot see how stupid that is to believe a dog and a sweet potato have a common ancestor over billions or trillions or quadrillions or quintillions of years. It's simply a religious belief. Darwin saw 14 kinds of finches. Yay, go Charlie. That's all he saw was birds producing birds. The beak shapes were different. Somebody decided to call them a different species. The birds don't care, and they're probably still interfertile. If you mix them all together, I bet they could all interbreed. If they've diversified enough where one cannot breed with the other, that still doesn't mean they don't have a common ancestor called a bird, but it does not mean they did have a common ancestor called an amoeba. That's where it is not science. Science is what we can observe. 352 species of pigeons. Wow. Who would have thunk it? They're still a bird. And they're limited. They're always going to be a bird. And they're not, that's not proof that the pigeons are related to the coyotes. I'm sorry. I wish you guys could understand. You have a religion. You don't want to admit that because then you can't demand tax dollars to pay for your religion to be taught. Start a private school, teach evolution to all those dumb enough to come learn it.
Okay, thank you, Kent.
Yep.
F4, okay. I know you probably want to respond, but time is moving quickly away from us. Feel free to email me if you'd like to. Oh, Kent, I see you waving, brother.
Any one of these that want, come back for a second round, schedule a debate with them. I'll do a debate every day on your channel. Any one of them, bring them on.
Let's do it. Let's make 2024 the year of all debates. So F4, feel free to reach out to me, and we can set aside just an hour and a half, 2-hour window or block for you and Kent to debate the topic, as currently we're just in a Q&A session. So F4, feel free to do that. And I appreciate you being here for some Q&A.
All right. Well, thanks, guys.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, we'll move to the next person then. And I'll reiterate what Kent said. We're looking for, actually, we're also doing a secondary debate challenge, Kent and I. Should evolution be taught in public schools? I put out a post the other day on it. If you're interested in debating that topic with Kent, please reach out to me. standingfortruthministries@gmail.com. We'll set it up. Okay, so next on the panel was Echoing Erudite. So I appreciate you, EE, for joining us. Who's your question for? And feel free to present that question.
Well, my question's for SKG, Skeptical Guy. Am I coming in okay with my audio?
Yes, very good.
All right, SKG. My question was, during your opening, you defined science as needing evidence, but I feel like you kept imposing imagination onto certain observations, like with the moth. So I wanted to know if you could provide any kind of evidence that would show evolution that doesn't require you to impose any imaginations and storytelling by appealing to unobserved changes over unobserved ages.
So, excuse me. So you are asserting then that the moth or mosquito or bacteria, that is imagination, that they have the traits to survive in a hostile environment? Yes?
They have the traits, but can you show me any reason to believe that they would change because of those traits and lead basically to a fish to fisherman evolutionary chain?
Fish to fisherman evolutionary. Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, so those traits became more dominant. And I do apologize because I'm not a geneticist, so I might be using the incorrect terminology here. They became more dominant, more prevalent, and thus they were able to survive in a increasingly hostile environment. So insecticides with the mosquitoes, antibiotics with the bacteria, the moth, that trait, the less dominant trait of the black moth, became far more dominant than the white peppered moth within that population size, right?
But that's my point, kind of. Though what you're telling me is, it sounds like imposing imagination. You believe that this is going to lead to something that is not directly observed, and I'm asking if you can give any direct observational evidence.
So we are observing it now. Why do you think that did not happen in the past? Why would what we observe now, is the same question to Kent, and I didn't really get an answer for it. The evidence that we have now, what we observe now, why would that not be the same in the past? Why would the half-lives be different in the past?
Because we see no observation that would lead us to believe that the moth would ever change into any kind of higher life form.
No observation that the moth would change into any other type of higher life form. But we see it changing and evolving, or I won't use the word evolving because that's the word you have issue with. Changing to increase its survivability, increase its odds in a increasingly hostile environment. So you have one of those traits that becomes dominant.
That in its code.
What was that?
But as Kent pointed out during the debate, the moth already had that stuff in its genetic code. What was it surviving from if it already had the ability to do that in its code?
Oh, what was it surviving from? Well, because of the Industrial Revolution, soot covered more trees, walls, etc. So the white moth stuck out more against a increasingly darker backdrop.
But it
So-
could already do that before the Industrial Revolution.
No, well, a majority of them were white because that was what the
Whoa, look at that. We got two Lupins here. Is Ken Hovind still on?
was more white walls, white trees, etc. Okay, so
I've
when
been
it becomes a
AFK
more
for a
darker
while. I just
background,
recently got
more
back.
subtle
I'm on my
colors,
phone.
because white will stick out.
Let's see here. We got some comments.
Why does such a mechanism like
Got
that
Mad
for the
Mac.
moth prove any
Evolution
kind of
falls so
fish
far
for
into the
fisherman
negative, it's
evolution?
not worth our time
How is that
anymore.
mechanism
Can't say I
gonna
don't
be
disagree.
unobserved?
Because it proves that
Right. In the textbook,
nature
we
is
still talk about
selecting
dinosaurs.
a
We all
trait
know they never
to
existed.
increase the
Okay.
probability of a population.
Evolution is belief. It takes faith because there is no
Right.
evidence, which makes it a
So-
religion. I agree.
Oh, no, if you want to finish your thought,
I bet none of these
Skeptic Guy, then
guys
we'll move to the next
know
question. We
what
gotta
the
do
scientific method is.
hour
I
on
also
this.
agree.
So
minutes or so.
we
Let's
take that
see. You have
what we
no
observe now,
evidence of Jesus, but
and we
creation. You have evidence all around you. Go
there's
look
no science
outside.
to say
I
that,
also agree.
what happens now doesn't happen in the past.
I
So
can't prove that I can't prove Jesus, but that's why my faith is strong and my science is good because I know that
Okay. Appreciate it. Kent, did you have something quick you wanted to add in light of this question? Go ahead.
I agree.
All
What happened to the
right.
moths probably happened in the past. They always
Sea
produced baby moths.
Science
They always had
Film
beautiful colors
Labs.
and some variety. There
Welcome.
might have been times when three
Hovind and
tailed moths
I
were of
slayed
volcanic
Lucy
eruptions
last
thousands
night.
of years ago.
That's
In that
cool.
case,
Now
the
you got to
moths
go
could
after the
survive
big
again.
one.
But what happened today is the moth survived. Nothing changed. It still was a moth. Still had some
That
life.
flamboyant boy evolutionist is getting
The moth stayed a moth. He's right. It probably was the same in the past. It was still a moth.
booty smacked right now
Still
in
a
real time
moth?
with real time
It's always been
facts.
a moth. It was created a moth by God. It
Interesting.
always produced baby moths. Moths
We
today
don't
are
promote
still
violence
producing
here,
baby
but
moths. You want me
metaphorically,
to
sure.
say all the students taught that a moth came from a protozoa.
Once again, protozoa, single cell organism, is that?
Single-celled creature. Come on, knock it off. You know what I'm talking about. You believe the moth came from a single-celled creature, don't you?
Yeah.
There you go. That's a religion. That's your belief. That's not science.
It's not a religion.
Just all in Christianly love.
Absolutely identical to the cells in a moth.
Gentlemen, okay, this has been fun. We got to set up a round two soon between Skeptic and Kent.
Do we
Okay,
really,
next
though, have
up,
to set up a round two? I mean, I
let's
think
have
this guy
Steve
is going to go
Christie from
back
Born
into his
Again,
cave
RNs for
and
your first
hibernate. I
time.
don't blame him. It's getting kind of
Not
cold.
your first time here in general. You've done debates and stuff, but first time in one of our
Maybe if he
evolution open
hibernates
mic
long
Q&A.
enough, he'll
So,
evolve
what's
a
going
good
on, my
idea.
brother? How you doing? And if you had a question, feel free to present it.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to say thanks for having me on. And Dr. Hovind, I remember you back from like the early to mid 90s. I still have some of your VHS tapes, so that's how far back I remember. And I would just want to extend a thank you because I had converted from an evolutionary believing Roman Catholic to a young earth creationist Protestant, and you had a lot to do with it. So thank you, and God bless you, Dr. Hovind.
Thank you. Okay, now we got to get Skeptic Guy converted.
Indeed, we both understand basic common biology and
so another skeptic guy
have common sense and can see the actual world for what it is.
From an
Yes.
evolutionary worldview, wouldn't asexual
You don't have to be a scientist, but I mean,
and sexual reproduction simply
what's
be
a scientist these days
unnecessary?
anyway?
And to piggyback on that, since sexual organs and sex chromosomes have to evolve simultaneously for reproduction to even be possible, given billions of years of evolution, how likely are male and female chromosomes and organs evolving at the same time even be realistic?
So
later tonight we may be going over some of the things with the Catholic Church. Walter Veith's total onslaught. So we may be diving into that because I don't know why I'm feeling a certain urge. I never finished the first half, so we're gonna finish the second half.
One cell, that's a lot easier to do, far less complex as we go up in orders of magnitude of complexity and the amount of cells. That would take way too much energy. Generally in nature, nature always takes the lazy the lazy option, conserves energy at all costs. So I have to imagine. I say imagine here because I'm not 100% sure what the ongoing science is.
I don't know. I don't know.
But
Proverbs, guys,
because I
ministry,
know that
whichever, whoever that is.
all of
If that is
nature's
the real Proverbs, guys, ministry.
the easy road out, the path of less resistance, then it logically tracks that that would be the same here as well. So it would take too much energy for it to be
Right.
biologically feasible for me or you, say, to reproduce asexually. So does that answer the first part of the question?
Well, what I'm trying to say is, let's assume that we evolved from single-celled organisms, and it just evolved and then became multi-celled organisms, but it still continued to be asexual. Wouldn't it just simply be easier to reproduce asexually than to reproduce sexually? In other words, why would there be a need in order to evolve into male and female?
I could
And then
jump
the
into
second part
AJ's
is
stream.
they would have to evolve simultaneously, both the male and female sex chromosomes, as well as the male and female organs.
Throw me in with the lines.
So,
and then
I
I'll come
thought I
out with
answered the
a
asexual thing.
necklace of teeth.
It takes too much energy.
And yet, over billions of years, it didn't seem to be a problem.
Well, for large multicellular organisms, it's quite a problem. So, for example, in the reptile population, some reptiles are able to. I've got a leopard gecko. It can shed its tail if it's threatened, and it takes an incredible amount of energy for it to grow its tail back. Right. So that is something that it does in order to in do or die situations. It has to do that, but it's not efficient in terms of energy consumption. Same thing with asexual reproduction. To split all of your cells in half to create a new copy of yourself.
And yet, by the at least from what I've heard, the contemporary evolutionary standpoint, that
why didn't
the standard of
humans
mankind has only been around
develop
for around
the
100,
ability to grow
200,000 years.
back?
And I don't know
I mean, maybe the
how long we've
rib.
been sexually
So
reproducing,
how come we
but
can't
for
grow
hundreds
back
of
limbs? I
thousands
think that would
and
be
possibly
pretty
billions of
helpful.
years, single-celled and even multi-celled organisms have been able to reproduce, assuming a much simpler multi-cell organisms than we are today. They didn't seem to have a problem with doing that, regardless of how hard it was. So what would be the point of sexual reproduction? And again, the second part, when they have to do so simultaneously, that is, evolve.
And Skeptic, before you respond, let's see if Kent has any thoughts, and then we'll throw it back to you, Skeptic guy.
Sure.
Since it was your question, we'll give you a quick last word.
And I'm done, by the way, Donnie.
Steve, great questions. I appreciate it, brother.
Yeah, the question is excellent, and the answer is ridiculous. Male and female would both have to evolve of the same new species at the same time in the same place. So if you're going to turn an amoeba or a protozoa or a single-cell creature into a frog, for instance, you got to get the male and female frog to both evolve at the same time. See, if the male evolved millions of years before the female, you got a problem. If he evolved thousands of miles away from the female, you got a problem. If he involved, they have to be evolved. They have to evolve male and female for every time. How many different kinds of animals are there? This has to happen every time, time after time after time. The male and female have to evolve at the same time in the same place. And they got to have all the equipment to produce the egg or the sperm to make a baby, and they got to be interested in each other. Why the cows aren't interested in the pine trees to mate with them? We got cows here. The male cows are looking for other cows to mate with. Bulls are looking for cows. They don't look for the dogs or the hamsters. See, this is ridiculous to believe, to imagine over millions of years. It could happen if we had lots of time. Time is the god of the evolutionist, and I think we could take a whole debate on time. But I'll give him trillions of years, quadrillions, vigintillions, okay? I'll give you all the time you want. It doesn't happen. We don't see it. It's a religious belief. Donnie, my 2 hours is up. I work hard all day. I'm about done. Can you take over and handle them?
Yes, I got your back, Kent. So that's 2 hours. And as always, 2 hours has flown by.
Easy work. Easy work.
We have many open mics and debates scheduled for January. Kent, you're going to be busy, brother. We're going to try and get you one maybe 2 every single day. So we're going to let Kent get some sleep. He's had a busy day, and we will continue our open mic. I know there's those on the panel who have questions for Skeptic Guy, or even questions for myself. I'm happy to engage. So Kent, thank you so much for doing this. Brother, we'll chat soon. We'll get some more scheduled.
Kent,
Thank you.
I appreciate it. I look forward to debating you again.
Anytime.
All right, everybody.
Bring it on
Thanks for
anytime.
watching
Come
now.
down
Have a
and
good
visit
day.
our reservation, man. I'll give you a tour of the place and you can convert it right here.
What?
Love to have
I don't have enough PTO for that. I'm sorry, Kent.
Okay.
See you, Kent. God bless. Thank you.
Okay, Kent, God bless. Thank you for being here. We'll have to schedule a round 2, and we got to make it a full trilogy.
I would love that.
Yes, and we will, because trilogies are always a ton of fun. We always call part 3 of a trilogy Endgame, so we're going to get there, Skeptic Guy. And to the audience, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just say I know probably more people